hero. I don't need a hero. I need a full bookish miracle. Possibly a suite of miracles. I don't walk on that side of the track, so I have absolutely no idea if there is a plural for a group of miracles. Let's go for a court. I need a court of miracles. This list, she's looking a little bit anemic. And welcome to a new video. Today we're doing something a little bit different for my channel, a video that I have never done before, in the hopes that I can in some way resuscitate my reading year. If you guys tuned in for my mid-year freakout tag, in which there was a great deal of freaking out, also a tiny bit of hyperventilating, then you will know that one of the conclusions that I came to mid that tag was that the second half of 2023 was going to have to look vastly different. Because the word that I chose to sum up my reading year so far in 2023 was mediocre. In the Barbie franchise, she's the 2006 Barbie Diaries. She is not giving. And I have racked my brains to try and come to some sort of conclusion as to why I've ended up in this situation. But as yet, that statistic has eluded me, despite the fact that I have my own reading tracker for 2023. I am at the beginning of trying to pull out all of the relevant information from that spreadsheet and make it make sense. And maybe you, like me, are also on the first year of your brand new bookish tracking spreadsheet, and you would also like to know how to make the numbers make sense at the end. How to interpret those pretty little graphs to better understand your reading tastes and have a better reading year going forward. And if that's the case, then don't despair, because I have a free and easy way that you can learn to do that with Brilliant. Brilliant is a website and app where you can learn math, statistics and computer science from the comfort of your own home. And you can do it in a fun way. Because I don't know about you, but as somebody with dyscalculia who has a brain that does not maths, all of those topics sound absolutely terrifying to me. And I really never thought that I was going to have fun learning anything about any of them. But Brilliant kind of changed all that. Brilliant is a ton of fun because it uses the principle of active problem solving by engaging with all of the really bright and eye-catching graphics on their site. Their courses make learning interactive right from the very basics all the way to some really advanced stuff. And to top it all off, they add new lessons every single month. So even if you do go in there with some advanced knowledge, there's always new concepts waiting there for you. I really cannot emphasize that no matter what your skill level is, and for me, it's basic, like it's chimney sums are scary, there is a way for you to learn and grow. Some of their very early math problems suddenly clicked a thing in my brain where I was like, oh, that's how I can apply maths to my real life. Yeah, really, when it comes to maths, my solution is always just ask somebody else. So if you've got a bookish spreadsheet that needs some number analysis, then why not click on my link below and try everything that Brilliant has free for 30 days. And for the first 200 of you who click on my link below and also get obsessed with Brilliant, you will get 20% off a premium annual membership. So come along with me on this scary math, statistics and computer science train, because it's not actually that scary after all. And hopefully you'll get to see that in my end of year bookish statistics video. But for now, let's jump back to some simple maths wherein we are only counting to 10. And not because I've arbitrarily decided that we were going to do a mid-year top 10, but just because 10 was the amount of books that I could find. Honestly, my Goodreads challenge for this year, variable. Variable is what it is. Now, usually the other reason that I've steered away in the past from doing mid-year best of lists is because my best of lists in the past haven't really changed that much. In fact, there have been previous years where I have in January or February read a book and gone, I know this is going to be my best book of the year. Or there have been years where I've been like, okay, this top 5 might get reshuffled 6 or 7 times, but it's still my top 5 books. This year, I don't feel like that, because I really and honestly think that if my plotting, if my stratagems to pick different kind of books for the second half of 2023 work, we could actually have a very different top 10 at the end of the year from our mid-year top 10. And although some of the books on this list I have loved a lot, and some of the books on this list are truly phenomenal, I would really love to find some books for the rest of the year to knock them off these spots. Oh, and as a final note, I will be listing these books more or less in chronological order from when I read them in January through to now, which means that they won't be ranked in any kind of order, which means that even if they do show up on my top 10 at the end of the year, you're still not gonna know quite where they're gonna fall. I am nothing if not mystery. Right, well, okay, let's get on with it. The first book that I've got here, I was actually under the delusion was also my first read of the year, and I don't know if it's because this book, which was actually my second read of the year, was so good that it eclipsed my first read, or if it was just that my first read of the year, which was actually Several People Are Typing, was so underwhelming I had just kind of decided to forget its existence. But either way, this book is still first in my heart, and the memory of it has endured all the way till almost August. And I'm constantly in a flux of, should I just reread it? Should I just pick it up? Should I just perpetually keep enjoying this instead of picking up other things that might also be underwhelming? Yeah, it's a fun place in my brain. And that book is, of course, Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe, or rather Lore Olympus Volume 1, and technically also Volume 2. That was why I said at the start that we have like a 10.5 situation going on. Because I read Volumes 1 and 2 pretty much back to back, and they are cemented together in my brain. If you have somehow been living under a rock and you have missed the phenomenon that is Lore Olympus, this is a Hades and Persephone retelling, and before you run away into the distance screaming, "No, consent!" I was with you on that one, and it took me a long time to get to these graphic novels because I have sat through many a Hades and Persephone retelling, many of which haven't changed all that much from the original, which gives me kind of the big icks. But Lore Olympus is not like that at all. Instead of retelling the myth of Hades and Persephone, all of the characters from Greek myth are kind of brand new. The concepts are the same, the hierarchy are the same, some of the backstories are the same, but the characters themselves are very much Rachel Smythe's own interpretation of what these characters would look like brought into a modern setting. I've read a lot of interpretations of the same love stories over and over again, and it can get really stale and it can get really old, and even beautiful writing sometimes just can't get it over the line. But Lore Olympus for me was not only a huge breath of fresh air on that front, but it was also the kind of relationship that I could get behind in like a squealy fangirly type way, which is very, very uncommon for me. I'm not a huge romance girly, and so I don't spend a lot of time thinking about my favourite ships, but these guys are just they are sweet, sweet toasted little cinnamon rolls. I just want to bundle Hades up and like take him away from everybody in the world who has ever hurt him. And I just want somebody to sit down and give Persephone a crash course on what it means to be a human without her mother's like puppetry and influence. This is one of the only like direct romance series that I've ever sat there going like, "Nyeh." And honestly, I'm so here for it. And in case anybody hasn't told you, Lore Olympus is actually available for free on Webtoons. We're on to volume 4 of the bind-ups, and volume 5 I think comes out in either October or November. If you don't want to wait for it, or if you're scared to invest in some like big kind of pretty expensive graphic novels that you're going to read in 5 minutes, you can always just go and read the webtoons. The only reason that I haven't is that I don't like to read on screens outside of my Kindle, so I'm just not there yet. But you never know, I might get desperate enough in my journey that I also join in. Next up, we have a book in a genre that, as I said in my mid-year freakout tag, is fast becoming one of my very favourite genres, and that is dark academia. And although this one kind of straddles the line between dark academia and horror, it still had enough of that gothic atmosphere to get it over the edge for me. And that book is Things We Do to Our Friends by Heather Darwin. And as always, I find myself making sure on my notes that I have said the correct Heather, because Heather Darwin brought out a book this year, but also Heather Fawcett brought out a book this year. And it would be weird to confuse these two, but my brain does it all the time. Anyway, Things We Do to Our Friends is kind of a weird dark academia. I wouldn't say that it's like typical of the genre, and that's why I say that I feel like it has one foot in thriller, because in this book we meet Claire, our main character, as she is pretty much leaving everything behind in England to come to Scotland and study at Edinburgh University, where she intends to make this a new life. New life, new start, new her. She's not going to talk about anything that happened in her past. And while she's studying in one of her art history classes, she's sort of drawn into this group of friends Friends, which is something that she initially thinks has happened just by accident, but she discovers the further she goes on in the book is very much on purpose. But that's kind of where it diverges from Dark Academia, because usually in a normal Dark Academia novel, this little group of friends and Claire would be quite obsessed with learning and the like university atmosphere. You would maybe see them doing like late night study sessions and stuff, but that is not what this book delivers. The university setting is very much just a way for all of these people to come together, and it's what this group of friends do to Claire and subsequently what Claire does to this group of friends that is the thing that hooks you in. This book grabbed me by the throat and just ran me over with a steamroller. Every single time I thought I knew what was going on, I did not know what was going on. Heather Darwin just keeps dropping all of these little nuggets, and it was like I could see them falling around me, but I didn't know why they were there. And then at the end it was just me running around frantically picking them all up and being like, I thought I knew something, I thought I knew something. I knew nothing. I knew nothing. And I'll be honest, there were some elements of the book that didn't quite work for me, some characters that I felt like could be a bit more fleshed out, and an incident at the end of the book which includes a little bit of animal abuse which I really didn't enjoy. Despite all of that, it was the writing that pulled me over the finish line in this one, because it just feels ominous and a little bit sickly and a little bit cloying from the very first page, and you're just never entirely sure what is going on. And like I say, by the time you are, it's kind of too late for you and everybody else. Okay, so next up we have a book that I read for my Patreon book club, and quite honestly, if I hadn't read it for the book club, I don't know how long it would have sat unread on my TBR, because it's one of those books where I love the idea, like I love the concept, but I'm always terrified that the execution is going to let me down. And that book is All of Us Villains by Amanda Foody and Christine Lynn Herman. Now when I went to remind myself of the name of the town in this and I looked up Goodreads, I discovered that this was tagged as YA romance, which I think we need to have a general discussion about when a book has teenage protagonists but is actually massively an adult plot, and when a book is meant for a YA audience, because I would not have put this in the YA category, because this book contains like a lot of things. All of Us Villains was sold to me, as I'm sure it was to everybody else, because it's emblazoned on the cover as like the next Hunger Games, and that is because it is one of those books that includes a tournament to the death, and my feeling is that anything that includes a tournament to the death can't really escape the Hunger Games comparison, but everything else that I have seen compared to the Hunger Games like that has inevitably let me down. And although I don't love the Hunger Games series as much, I adore the first book, and any other book that does the same thing held up against that has kind of fallen short. But not so much with this one. This one completely delivered for me. So this book is about the sleepy little town of Ilvernath, which normally is not a very remarkable place, but every 20 years becomes the site of a tournament to the death. 7 families send 7 of their heirs into a tournament to essentially win the rights to wield magic, as in like they will then be the only family that are in control of magic for this region. And the thing that really got me about this book is that it takes you to all of those perspectives. So you very slowly fall in love with each of these characters, become invested in their welfare, and then they get thrown into the lion's den and you get to sit there like, well, screw my mental health, I guess. And you know what? It sounds really wrong to be like, I enjoyed the hell out of this book, but that's exactly what I did. This book is a blast. There are so many times when you are rooting for somebody and then you change your allegiances mid-chapter and are like, no, actually that person. And the whole plot is just so high stakes from the get-go that you can't fail to be invested and like dragged along behind it. And I mean, fundamentally, if you, like me, love a morally grey character, a character who cannot be completely redeemed because of their actions, but who still has so much to give anyway, then this is the book for you. Up next we have the other Heather. We have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather faucet. Again, if you are coming from my mid-year freakout tag, then you will know that I have absolutely loved and raved about this book since pretty much the minute that I read it. And it's funny because once again, this is not a very me book. It's not a book that I would ever have imagined picking up and adoring so much. This book is about Emily Wilde. She is an academic in a kind of quasi-Victorian society, and she is travelling to a faraway land to finally complete the entries in her Encyclopedia of Fairies, which she is going to publish as an academic work. But the fairies in the region that she is going to visit are ancient, and they are a lot more dangerous than some of the other fairies that she has documented for this work. And as a result of that and a few other things, one of her colleagues decides to join her. That colleague is Wendell Bambleby, and they then spend the rest of this book sniping and being hateful to each other in the most adorable way, in a way that made condensation on the surface of my little dark heart. There were just so many things set against this book. It's a fairy book. I'm not really a fairy girl. It's very much light academia in that we have got all of the like trappings of putting together a serious work and being obsessed with a subject, but without any of the kind of dark twisty elements, and the dark twisty elements are the thing that I enjoy about that. Like, the reason that I like dark academia when it's done well is because it really critiques that atmosphere and it really kind of pulls it apart, and at its core it's the romance, which again, meh, not really my area of true love, ba-doom boom. So really, if you look at it complexly, there are a lot of reasons why I shouldn't love this, but I do. I love it so much, and I am just like sitting on the edge of my seat waiting for the next installment. And for any of my guys, gals and non-binary pals out there who loved Lady Trent, who is devastated that the Lady Trent books are over, this is as close as I can find to that series. Like, out of all of the books that I've read since I finished the Lady Trent books, this is the one which most clearly matches the tone and the atmosphere, and kind of also weirdly the subject is very close to the subject. Two different women wanting to be academics on some like supernatural subject. I want the next book now. Now for a book which I have been desperately anticipating since I heard about its release. It was on my most anticipated list for 2023. I picked it up the minute it hit my doormat. And really for me this year that has been a little bit unusual. Even when my most anticipated books have shown up, it's taken me a little while to get to them. But that is why I am delighted to say that this book, when I picked it up, served all of the things that I wanted, and then a little side of some things that I didn't. Allow me to explain. The book that I am talking about is The Strange Case of the Alperton Angels by Janice Hallett. A couple of years ago now, I read The Appeal by Janice Hallett, which I'm pretty sure ended up on the top 10 list of whatever year that this featured in. I absolutely adored it. It was amazing. Janice Hallett writes mystery slash thrillers, but in a mixed media format. So for example, both The Appeal and The Strange Case of the Alperton Angels are written in like emails, WhatsApp conversations, transcriptions from answering machine services, flyers, pieces of books, play scripts, all those kind of things like pieced together to give you a mystery. And in The Mysterious Case of the Alperton Angels, we are following a true crime writer. She has been asked by an imprint to look at a very famous cold case and try and find a new angle on it. In this case, it is the Alperton Angels, which were a cult who all committed suicide in a building one night after having determined that one of their members had a baby that they thought was the Antichrist. That baby and its mother escaped and were kind of like scooped up by social services and were never seen again, and nobody has ever had a lead on it since then. Then at the same time, this main character discovers that one of the men that she used to work with a long time ago on a newspaper is also doing a book on this very same subject. She finds herself both in competition for this story and forced to work together with him to get information, and those two threads kind of entangle their way all the way through the book. And what Janice Hallett served me was not only this book, which is a rollicking mystery, which has so many twists and turns, which has so many bits where you read a page on page 50 and you go, oh, that was related to the thing I read on page 3, and you're making, just like the main character is, your own conclusions and your own little connections between all of the information, so you are as much a detective as she is. Like, all of those things were exactly what she did in The Appeal and the things that I loved the most. But On the back of that, it also served me a discussion about true crime that I was not expecting, and genuinely I came out of it feeling a little bit like, oh, I need a shower. Like, this book talks quite a lot about not only finding the truth, but what the truth is, and who gets to determine what the truth is, and whose version gets to be the one that the public hears versus the one that the victims have. And it also talks a lot about the integrity of the people serving these stories to a wider audience, and why you're writing them, and what you do with them, and what it does to your career. So then, like, how much you are benefiting from people who are victims. And it's such an intricate book. There's so many different layers to it that I didn't expect, and I absolutely loved it. It's been a while since like a mystery or thriller has actually made that list, so I'm really interested to see whether this one pops back up at the end of the year or not. Okay, so next up, some proof of the fact that I am a little bit dark academia obsessed this year. We have the book The Cloisters by Katie Hayes, and this book has just so many of my tiny little niche interests in it. It's a little bit like, at what point do you start saying this book was actually written for me, like specifically me, like only me? This one is about Anne Stillwell. She comes from a very tiny town in the middle of nowhere in America, and she wants out. She wants out so badly that she can taste it, that it's the only thing that she thinks about. So when she gets an internship at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, managing to talk about and guide people around exhibits of her very, very, very narrow and niche area of art history interest, she thinks that everything is finally looking up. When she gets to the Met, she's told that the person who she was supposed to be working for has left. They've got like an opportunity to do an exhibit somewhere else, and there's no job for her. Enter Patrick Rowland. He is the curator of a part of the Met called the Cloisters, which is the Met's like Gothic museum plus a load of really like creepy Gothic gardens. Patrick offers Anne a job. She takes it on the spot because it's the only way that she's going to get to work at the Met over the summer. But then she discovers that what Patrick wants her to do is to curate an exhibit of ancient tarot cards. And she has absolutely no idea at this point how much those tarot cards are going to be influencing her fate. The feeling of this book is like being slowly caught in sap, not syrup, but sap, where you know that the further you go through it, the more that sap is going to harden and the more you're going to be trapped. Trapped in a situation maybe of your own making, but maybe not. There is a huge amount of discussion in this one about predestination, about how much you are able to change your fate versus how much your fate is just established for you and you're just blundering through it. And because of that, it felt like every little decision that Anne made was so weighty. So much sitting on the edge of your seat, but with like an uneasy, queasy stomach in this book where you're like, oh, I don't know if you should do that. I loved this book, and I know that quite a few people have said that there are places where it's really slow, or that there's a little bit too much information about the art history side of things. And I get all of that, like I see those criticisms, but for me it just didn't apply. And I am somebody who hates art and music being described to me in books. It's just a complete turn off for me. But this book just, it did it, and it did it so well, and I was just obsessed is definitely the phrase. Next up is a complete surprise of a book. I did not expect this one to like grab me and hold me where it did, like in a place of complete terror. And no, I don't know. Tell me what the thing is, don't show me what the thing is, I don't want to know. This one is also a book that I briefly mentioned in my mid-year freak out tag, but I mentioned it solely because of the cover, because the cover looks like this. This is The Scourge Between Stars by Ness Brown. I pre-ordered this on the basis of this cover. I didn't look at the blurb. I just went, I'm having that, that's for me. But because I pre-ordered this book the way that I did, I also had absolutely no idea what length it was going to be. And so when this turned up and it was less than 200 pages, I was like, how is this book going to deliver the plot that it says that it's going to in such a short amount of space? But oh, it did. So this one is about Jackson Albright. She is the acting captain of a ship called the Calypso, which is part of a fleet trying desperately to get back to Earth from a massive failed colony. The resources have run out, the people on the ships are quite ill or they're close to starving, and they have very very few rations to get them back. Like, they have exactly enough rations at this point to either get them to Earth or to get them back to the colony. And it is at this point, with all of this going on, that Jacqueline's father, who is actually the captain of this ship, has shut himself in his quarters, and he is refusing to come out or communicate with anybody on staff, which of course is putting her in a horrendous position. But while she's in this horrendous position, they get a weird distress call, and at the same time as they get the weird distress call, they get an intruder alert for somebody on board the ship. This is a pacey little sci-fi horror which has so many more twists than should be able to fit into a book this size, and just, I am not sure how it managed to develop the characters so thoroughly that it did in such a short space. Like, I was expecting this was going to be plot over substance, but it was so not that. I cared so deeply for everybody in this book from the minute that they were mentioned on the page. Ness Brown did a thing that I liken to the Agatha Christie way of giving you characters, where you get a character, you get their name, you get a few defining characteristics of them, and then what you really know them by for the rest of the book is their voice. It's such a clever but such a difficult thing for an author to do, and they just absolutely smashed it. If I was to sell the horror in this book, I would say it's kind of a combination between the inevitable countdown that exists in Illuminae and a locked door mystery wherein you know lots of people are gonna die. Honestly, this book just packed so much in. It talks about family, it talks about obligation. There's so much diversity in this book, and it's not just dropped in for effect, it's actually discussed on the page. And there's even a discussion in here about androids who have sentience, who have the ability to reason, but who are still in this book tools and treated as tools, and what they are for versus what they should be allowed to do. And honestly, I'm so glad that I read this one. I'm so glad I took a chance on it. If you are looking for something to scare the socks off you, just pick this up. Next up on this list, we have the first non-fiction. I took this one away to my first little holiday. If you watched my read with me on a beach video, it was the book that I was reading, and that I was like so intently focused on that I was shutting everything else and everybody out. This book has been on my shelf for years, and I have started it twice and then put it down because I wasn't in the mood for it. And although it's one of quite a few true crime memoirs on my shelves that I was really excited about, for some reason I just kept forgetting to go back to it. And then very recently I bought Jeannie Vanesco's memoir about her dad, which I didn't actually know was by the same author until I literally went to shelve it, and I was like, oh my god, yeah, that book. And then I figured I should probably read her memoirs in chronological order, so that's the reason that it got plucked off of my shelf after waiting there for so long. And I could kick myself for leaving this on that shelf for so long. There's no other real way to explain this book other than to say that this is essentially Jeannie Vanesco interviewing the guy who raped her when she was in college. So at the start of this book, we get a scene with Jeannie and the guy who raped her when they are just teenagers. They met when they were in high school through like a mutual friend. They became completely inseparable. They were best friends for a really long time. They had a really long and deep history. She was one of the only people who he felt could pull him out of his mental health problems. And then when they went to college, she got very drunk. He carried her down to a basement where she was completely alone, and he assaulted her. And they never spoke again after it. He apologised to her and then literally never spoke to her again. And then years and years later, when she is in a relationship, all these thoughts and feelings pop up for a variety of different reasons, and she decides that she actually wants to write about this. And not only does she want to write about it, but she wants to get in contact with Mark. She wants to ask him why he did it. She wants to ask him exactly what this did to his life, whether it's had an impact on his life the same way that it's had an impact on hers. And the resulting conversations and transcripts are this book, interspersed with chapters where Jeannie kind of takes you back and forward through time about how she has coped with it and what she has done with it. and it is so arresting. It's so in your face. It's so matter of fact. The book is almost dry. It's almost emotionless. And there's a discussion at the beginning of it where Jeannie's like, I felt like if I was very emotional, if I did say things like, you hurt me, you upset me, you ruined my life, that she wouldn't be taken seriously. She wonders multiple points during this book whether she's giving Mark a fair shot, whether she is giving him enough of the page, whether she's asking him enough questions so that she can appropriately display his heart in this book. And all of that's really difficult to read about because you can see the way in which she is terrified that even though she's writing this book, even though he's admitted it and has consented to be included in this book, she still isn't going to be believed. It's really hard to read, but it's so worth it. And I think because of the subject matter, it took me quite a long time to read, even though the book itself is not actually that dense. There's not that many words to a page. Several of the pages are transcripts, so they're like literally physically shorter on the page. But yeah, it took me a long time to read, but I'm really glad that I did. Now next up we have a book that I talked in quite a lot of detail about in my mid-year freakout tag, so I'm just going to kind of skim over it a little bit here. Also because I think that this book is one of the books that is going to definitely end up in my top 10 of 2023, because when I was asked in the mid-year freakout tag what was your favourite book of this year, this is the only book that popped into my head. It wouldn't go away because, you know, even though I've been salty about how few books I have loved this year, there are still books that I have loved clearly on this list. This is the book that eclipsed all of them. So this book is About a Son by David Whitehouse, and it is a, again, true crime memoir about the murder of a young man called Morgan Hayher in England. He was walking with his friends not even that late at night heading to a Halloween party, and they were set upon by a group of individuals who they had never met before, who knew nothing about them, and who brutally attacked them and murdered Morgan. But this book is very unique in that David Whitehouse is a true crime author. He is an author of non-fiction. But this book is incredibly unique because what David Whitehouse has done through like a series of connections is take Morgan's father Colin's diaries in the wake of Morgan being murdered, and he has made them into this book with the diaries, with interviews with friends and family around about the time. He has pieced together the timeline literally from the night that they found out that Morgan had been killed all the way through to pretty much the present day. There is a quote on the back that says something along the lines of, it is a feat of creative non-fiction, and that is exactly what it is. It very much feels like you've picked up a literary fiction book because David Whitehouse pieces this together so carefully with beautiful imagery and then these absolutely raw punch sentences which just hit you between the eyes of how things felt. Like, there's all of these details of what's going on, but then here's how it felt, and he repeated that process throughout the entire thing. Like, when Morgan's father is desperately trying to get some sort of justice for him, but the system keeps letting him down again and again, and there's an exploration in here about what the media's job is again, and what the job of the police and the system is. And despite the fact that the topic was so difficult to read, I kept wanting to pick it up. It was the only thing that I wanted to read. I put down all the other fiction I was reading at the time, and I read it through being really, really ill. I was really sick when I was reading this book, but nothing was going to stop me from reading it. This one is just one of the best true crime books I have ever read. It's up there with My Sister Millie by Gemma Dowler, which is like what I hold up as the best true crime memoir I've ever read. I'm just so glad that I took a shot on this one because I had heard nothing about it before I saw the paperback on a table in Waterstones, and it deserves so much more press than it's getting. Finally, a book that I literally just finished maybe like 2 days ago. And it's weird how the last 3 books on this list have all been non-fiction, because it's not like I'm picking up predominantly non-fiction in the last couple of months. It's just that the standouts have all been non-fiction. This book is another one of the 404 Inklings series, which I've talked about a few times. They are like very, very short primers to interesting and like very current topics. This book is Sons and Others by Tanaka Mahishi, and it is a book about loving and supporting and finding resources for the men in all of our lives who have experienced sexual violence but who have never found a way to talk about it because it is so socially abhorrent. It is a book about the way in which we teach our children, unknowingly sometimes, toxic masculinity, which then feeds into this cycle of survivors never being able to tell their story, which then leads into more cycles of toxic masculinity and violence. It's a discussion about the way in which male survivors have been treated, where historically they have been looked at as people who are then suspicious, people who then might go on to commit these violent acts themselves, like somehow it's catching. But it's also a discussion about being non-white in this system and also about being queer. There's a lot of conversation in here about queer fathers and partners and sons who have been sexually assaulted and who are taken less seriously. Again, with the 404 books, I'm always left kind of wanting, because I feel like Tanaka Mahishi had so much more to say, that if this book had been longer, they would have been able to massively expand on some areas of this topic. Like, you could see that they were scaling things back and giving you the only top notes that they were allowed. And I know that that's the purpose of these books, and I have loved this format, but for this particular topic and for other topics that I have really adored, I have just wished that there is more. But that was my literal only criticism about this. I loved this so much. The forthrightness of this book, the way that it's unapologetic in its criticisms, the fact that it starts on the very first page by being like, do you remember the rape scene in The Mask? Because it put me such on the back foot, where I was like, what? No, a rape scene in The Mask? And because it did that to me, I spent the entire book questioning everything that I knew. Like, everything that I knew, every assumption that I had ever made. Just such a good book. And I also feel like if you want to like explore this topic but you're scared of taking on a longer work because of how heavy it is, a really short primer like this would be a great place to start. So that's it, guys. Those were 10 of the books that I have loved the most by the midway point of 2023. And you know what? I actually have really enjoyed filming this video, because when I look back on my mediocre reading year and I look at the numbers of books that I have DNF'd or just not loved that much, it feels a little bit overwhelming, and it's hard to find the joy in the books that I did adore. But filming this video for you guys has kind of reminded me about how much I loved the ones that I did find that were good. So it's maybe like made me slightly less discouraged, but it has made me more determined, like infinitely more determined to make the second half of this year look like this video and not like the mid-year freakout tag or my series tracker videos, which was just like endless no. If you have got this far in the video, please first of all tell me what your favourite book has been so far in 2023, and also leave me down below the star emoji, because we are aiming for those stars. We are aiming for those 5 stars for the rest of this year. And don't forget to check out my link below in the description for Brilliant. You can get 30 days free of their premium content to test out, and for the first 200 people who click my link, you can get 20% off an annual Brilliant membership so that you can learn in happiness. And then you can come back to my channel and you can tell me what you know about statistics, and we can look at my spreadsheet together. And I'll speak to you all soon. Bye!